may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, I have something that I need to admit. It's not fun admitting this, but we were too low on Chris Carson over the past 2 years. Now, no, he didn't come out and win anybody of their fantasy leagues, but it's hurtful coming through and admitting this because it's so clear that we were wrong with Chris Carson in that his usage in the offense was the exact opposite of what we have said, in that while we were avoiding him over the past 2 years, is we were looking at a running back in that backfield in Rashad Penny, and I was unwilling to give him up. I mean, we saw him as a rookie coming in that 2018 NFL draft class. And if you read our 2021 rookie draft guide, we have gone through and we have presented the historical hit rates and the minimum thresholds that you're looking for with 4 different running back boxes. You need to see the speed, the pass catching ability in college, the size, and the NFL draft capital. And then that's how you can really have a good idea on what you're expecting with those running back prospects coming into the NFL. And Rashad Penny was elite with every single one of those boxes. And you looked at him historically and you went, literally nobody like this has ever busted that has checked the same amount of boxes as Rashad Penny. So I was way too high on him. I was unwilling to just give in and say that Chris Carson was the starting running back in Seattle. And yeah, clearly we were so wrong on that. But for whatever reason, Chris Carson, after establishing himself as the guaranteed 3-down running back for the Seattle Seahawks, now all of a sudden I think is actually a value in fantasy drafts. Now, he's been a player that I haven't drafted really anywhere over the past 2 years, but now I can easily see myself going out and drafting some Chris Carson for 2021. Let me go through and talk about why I think he's actually being undervalued in fantasy drafts. But of course, before we get into it, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And please let me know what y'all are doing with Chris Carson, because I don't really understand why his ADP is so low right now. But if we dive into this profile, now, no, we're not just going to be looking at the kind of prospect Chris Carson was coming into the NFL, because obviously we have so much data already over the past few years and what his usage has been in Seattle that really what he was coming into the NFL at this point isn't important at all. Now, what I will say with Chris Carson is the age is concerning. Now, we actually just made a video talking about why Derrick Henry is going to be a fade for me at the very top of drafts, given the fact that at least one of the reasons was that he's almost 28 years old. He's 27 already, and we have seen the historical fall off of elite running backs at that same exact mark. So yes, it is a concern that Chris Carson is going to turn 27 this season, but you're getting a discount. So I think the risk there actually doesn't necessarily outweigh the reward that you could have with the pick that he's going to cost to bring into your team. Because right now you can get Chris Carson in the 4th round of fantasy drafts. And I think in that range, I mean, if you decide to go a little bit contrarian, y'all know I don't necessarily like to do this. My preferred start is going running backs early and then hammering in wide receiver value in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. But Chris Carson, if you decide to go with a tight end early, if you miss out on a running back that you like, I think he's actually a great guy that you can have at the beginning of round 4, possibly bringing him in as your running back 2. And if we look over the past 3 years for Chris Carson, he's been a very reliable running back 2 in fantasy. In 2020, he finishes as the running back 14 in points per game. In 2019, he was the running back 12. In 2018, he was the running back 15. So you have seen 3 years in a row that Chris Carson is right in the sweet spot of about 15 fantasy points per game, which you know is going to be good for a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 finish. Now, I don't necessarily think that we can say that this is going to be consistently done through the same avenue. And that's why, at least this is one of the main reasons why I'm changing my mind on Chris Carson here. Because after that 2019 season where he finished as the running back 12, I was looking at him and I was going, well, yeah, obviously he goes through, he gets an insane amount of touches in this offense. Rashad Penny was injured the entire season. But a big thing is, I mean, the Seattle Seahawks were so run heavy. What happens if they decide to start passing the ball more? And we thought that that was going to be a massive downside to Chris Carson, because we hadn't necessarily seen him take all the usage in the receiving game for the running backs up until this point. But you actually had the Seattle Seahawks do exactly what we were worried about this past season. They come out and instead of just being run, 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 play action, no, they were actually pass, 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 then maybe run. I mean, we saw them transition over to be a more pass-happy offense, especially at the beginning of the season. And what happened is you saw the carries per game fall from almost 20 in 2019 down to about 12 in 2020. Now, with this significant fall, you would have expected that you would have had a significant fall in production for Chris Carson. But simply, that didn't happen. And the reason is because Chris Carson almost saw 4 targets a game in 2020. If you actually remove his injured game, Chris Carson did hit the 4 targets a game mark, which is absolutely massive because you can be a running back that is not on a super run heavy offense if you're getting the usage in the receiving game, and you could still be highly effective in fantasy. Now, I will say one quick note where we were saying that Chris Carson finished as the running back 14 in points per game this past year. He actually left a game injury with a mid-foot sprain. So if you take out that injured game, he actually averages 16.6 fantasy points per game, which would have been good for the running back 11, but that's just one small asterisk that I want to be able to put on his production when we discuss it. And what this does is it proves that Chris Carson can succeed in fantasy regardless of the scheme, if it's going to be run heavy or pass heavy for the Seattle Seahawks. And this is very important going forward because they have a new offensive coordinator coming in. So now Shane Waldron is going to be the new offensive coordinator. He was the passing game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams over the past 3 seasons. And obviously, you would naturally assume that he's going to bring over the pass to Seattle, and he's possibly going to skew this team to be a little bit more pass happy in neutral situations. But a lot of people are speculating that the reason Brian Schottenheimer actually got fired was because he wanted to go through and turn this offense into a pass-happy offense at the beginning. Then Russell Wilson started turning the ball over, and Pete Carroll got pissed, and then he decided to go, you know what, I'm taking over from here. You're getting fired at the end of the offseason. Now, I don't necessarily know what to believe in this instance. I don't think really anybody watching this video has a great grasp on what we can expect in terms of the run to pass ratio for the Seattle Seahawks this upcoming year. But there's one thing that I really want to point out, and this is something that not nearly enough people talk about. I mean, it's discussed a lot in the DFS community, but in the fantasy football community on a whole, I mean, it's really overlooked. And that is going to be the pace of play that we have seen from Shane Waldron compared to Brian Schottenheimer. Now, of course, so much goes into this where we can't naturally assume that Shane Waldron is going to bring over this exact pace of play because he wasn't even the offensive coordinator in LA. He wasn't the head coach. He was the passing game coordinator, but we can assume that he's going to be bringing a lot of those same characteristics to this new situation in Seattle, especially when we understand that you would naturally assume that the pace of play for the Los Angeles Rams would be lower than a neutral situation, given the fact that Jared Goff kind of had to sit there and be told by Sean McVay what the opposing defense was presenting him and where he was going to go. So you would assume that the Rams were near the bottom of the NFL in terms of how often they are getting those plays off in a neutral scenario, but it's actually quite the opposite. So if you look at the Los Angeles Rams over the past 3 years, these are the 3 years that Shane Waldron was the passing game coordinator there. They were actually 12th in pace of play in 2020. They were 3rd in pace of play in 2019 and 3rd in 2018 as well. So they were near the very top of the NFL in their pace of play, even with Jared Goff needing to see that defense and have Sean McVay tell him what was going on beforehand. And on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, what you had with Seattle and Brian Schottenheimer is they were getting off way less plays per game, which we know means less fantasy points on a macro sense, where Brian Schottenheimer led this team to have the 22nd pace of play in 2020, the 24th in 2019, and the 18th in 2018. So that is going to be massive in terms of if Shane Waldron can come in, if he can raise this team just to be average in the amount of plays that they're able to get off per game, or at least the pace that they are going. And we know the efficiency of the offense is most likely going to make it where they're near the top of the league in the amount of plays that they are going to run this upcoming season. That would be fantastic. Now, the one concern that is still there with Chris Carson, because we've already established that we know with the contract, we understand he is going to be a player that is the bell cow running back in Seattle. And on top of this, we have seen him thrive in both a pass-heavy offense and a run-heavy offense. Now, the one concern is going to be the injuries suffered by Chris Carson. So what I really want to do here is I really want to go through and see if we have any similarities, because we know this is a player that has missed a considerable amount of time since coming into the NFL in 2017. And you know that I am the last person to call a player injury prone. I mean, a guy like Deebo Samuel, yes, after we have that long list, we can begin to label players then. But the fantasy community is usually way too early to label players as injury prone when we don't necessarily have great reason to. I mean, look at Keenan Allen as the best example of this for way back in the day. But anyway, we go through, we try to look for some similarities here. I want to see a hamstring strain, a groin strain. If you continue to see soft tissue injuries with strains, that is going to be the main concern for predicting injury going forward. But here with Chris Carson, he had an ankle fracture his rookie season in 2017 that required surgery, shut him down for the season. And then beyond that, 2018 missed no time. In 2019, he missed 3 games with a hip fracture. So ankle fracture, hip fracture, 2 completely different things, not correlated at all there. And then in 2020, he missed a 4-game stretch due to a mid-foot sprain. So, I mean, this is just apples to oranges here. You're seeing that Chris Carson has had 3 injuries that has caused him to miss time at the NFL level so far. And there seems to be no correlation between any of these injuries. So while, yes, it's not like Chris Carson is one of the most healthy running backs in the NFL, but at the same time, we can see that I think maybe the injury concerns are a little bit overblown here. Now, another thing that we really need to talk about is just how this environment in Seattle is going to be fantastic for producing fantasy points. And what we can do is we can go through and really try to identify how good of a quarterback Russell Wilson is for this overall offense. Now, I understand we have said this so many times before, but this stat is not everything. But at the same time, it is a very useful tool to evaluate a quarterback in the situation that they were given. Now, of course, I mean, you can't necessarily just compare these guys as apples to apples because they're all playing behind different offensive lines, different head coaches, different wide receivers. I mean, there's so many things that go into this variable. But when you start to have a very large sample, I think that's when we can begin to look at it credibly. And here we are going to be looking at adjusted yards per attempt for Russell Wilson since 2014. And if we go through his standing in the NFL since 2014 in adjusted yards per attempt, you have 11th, 6th, 3rd, 11th, 9th, 2nd, and 6th. So Russell Wilson, on average, during this very large sample, where I think it is fair to kind of use this to evaluate him, has been 6th on average in adjusted yards per attempt throughout the entire NFL in the starting quarterbacks. So that is significant in saying we know that Chris Carson is attached to an elite quarterback. We understand that elite quarterbacks, they can go through, they can drive offenses into the red zone, they can present their running backs with a ton of touchdown equity, and that's what's important here. And you've actually seen this manifest itself over the past 3 years in Seattle, where in 2018, this team was 1st in rushing in the NFL. In 2019, they were 4th, and in 2020, they were 12th. So yes, they're trending in the wrong direction, but at the same time, I mean, over the past 3 years, they're 5th or 6th pretty much on average in the amount of rushing production that they are having on the season whole. And combine this with the fact that Chris Carson himself is easily the bona fide rushing leader on this team, where there's going to be nobody else to go through and take touches away from him. But if we are going to be looking at any changes happening to this offense for this upcoming year, this is a big thing that we actually are doing with our draft guide that comes out around the 20th of this month, is we are going through and we are looking at these players and we are going, okay, this is what they've done historically. This is the context that they did this historically in, and what changes do we have for this upcoming season that we need to account for? And with Chris Carson, there are very few changes besides the Shane Waldron coming in to be offensive coordinator, which we've already discussed as, I am pretty sure, a good thing. We don't know if they're going to be more pass happy or run happy, but we can be damn sure that Brian Schottenheimer was one of the worst offensive coordinators in the NFL over the past 3 years. So just getting him out of that situation is going to be fantastic for everybody involved. Now, beyond that, I mean, the offensive line, not really seeing any changes at all. PFF actually has them projected to be the 19th best offensive line this upcoming season. So obviously, that's not a good mark. Being slightly below average to average is not what you want to be finding in an offensive line for your running back. But it is notable to say, well, I mean, this is an offensive line unit that has not been good for a very long time now. 19th, if they can get that, I think that's going to be fine in trying to have the same level of run efficiency for Chris Carson this upcoming year. It's not like it was some elite unit that's all of a sudden getting worse. If anything, it's the exact opposite. And they do bring in Dwayne Eskridge as another player for this offense. But Eskridge was brought in more so just to be a player that was dynamic. I mean, he can do stuff in terms of returning kicks, returning punts, and at the same time, what's very important with Dwayne Eskridge is this is a player that is not profiled to see a lot of targets. He is more so going to be someone bringing in 4.40 40-yard dash speed to this offense. So what he can hopefully do is allow DK Metcalf to play as the X in this offense, and instead Dwayne Eskridge is going to be the field stretching player, where possibly this leads to having less stacked boxes for Chris Carson. It leads to DK Metcalf possibly getting more single coverage, and I think that could be good on the whole for the Seattle Seahawks offense, especially when we know Dwayne Eskridge himself doesn't profile to be someone seeing a decent amount of targets. But thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Go down to the comment section. Please let me know if y'all are going to be drafting Chris Carson anytime soon. Like I said, he's someone that I haven't been drafting at all in the past, but I think we were wrong in our evaluation of that. And I think that this upcoming season, there's a chance for us to get it right. So yeah, thank you, my dudes. Go down there, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you so much for everyone joining the flock in Will, Wesley, Ethan, Sabres, Jonah, Austin, Andrew, Doug, Brandon, and Adam. Thank you so much, my dudes.